Allow me, a former leftist, to explain why the left always wins the culture war and what we can do about it. Sup guys, welcome back to KingdomCraft, and I am trapped in a dark, scary cave, which is a really good metaphor for the cultural situation that Christians find ourselves in. So I'm going to be sharing 3 really bad strategies that conservative Christians have generally used. But I want to clarify that when I talk of conservative and leftist, these terms are not political terms in this context. There is overlap with politics, but I'm talking in terms of culture. Because as a former leftist, I can tell you that leftism is not just a political theory, it's a religion that tries to set itself in opposition to Christianity. And it's really the religion that has replaced Christianity in all the cultural institutions of the West. All the cultural institutions in the West were founded upon Christianity, but today they're all hijacked by leftists. The left never creates anything, they just hijack stuff, and they've been really successful at doing so. At the end of this video, I'm going to share the secret to leftist victory. But first, I'm going to share 3 really bad strategies that conservatives have used. So the first one is having a very libertarian mindset. Again, I'm not talking about libertarian in terms of a political theory. I think Christians can agree to disagree on issues like that. But I'm talking about a cultural mindset of libertarianism, which always fails. Here's what I mean. A lot of conservatives, particularly the more older generation boomer conservatives, have a sort of live and let live mentality that, they'll say, I don't care what you do in your private life as long as it doesn't impact other people. The problem is, everything you do impacts other people. Everyone influences the culture, and everyone is influenced by the culture. The more people in the culture engage in a certain thing, the more people in the culture are going to want to engage in a certain thing. That's why the left always says, normalize this, normalize that. They know what they're doing. The more you normalize something, the more people are going to do it. That's why they say, normalize, people making their own OnlyFans, and normalize prostitution, normalize every form of sexual deviancy. If you look at the If you look at the Snapchat, news feed, you'll find the most disgusting things that they're actively trying to normalize. So yeah, there is really no such thing as a truly private life, because everything you do has an impact on the culture. Even if it's just a drop in the ocean. Enough drops makes the ocean. So libertarianism, in a cultural sense, is a total myth. There's no live and let live. And a lot of conservatives I've heard will still say, you can't legislate morality. I'm personally opposed to this behavior, but I wouldn't legislate against it. Well, why not? Every law you can think of, every good law that is in some sense legislating morality. You're not allowed to steal. Why? Well, because it's immoral to steal. And you don't even need to be a Christian to understand that. That's just natural law. Every law is in some sense trying to legislate morality. Even if it's a bad law, then it's just legislating a false system of morality. Like leftist laws, some leftist states like Canada try to ban free speech because in their system, if you say certain things that offend a certain group of people, that's immoral. So you always legislate morality. The question is, which morals are you going to legislate? So I know that I'm not advocating for a theocracy or anything. I'm just saying the idea that you can't legislate morality is totally bogus. But that's the mindset that conservatives have entered the discussion with. And that's why I think a lot of the, Republican in the US or whatever other right-wing parties there are in other countries tend to focus on economic issues, because economic conservatism is much less controversial than cultural conservatism. Of course, the left doesn't want you to have a right-wing belief on anything. But generally speaking, they'll be much more accepting if you're socially liberal and economically conservative than if you're economically liberal and socially conservative. It's if you're a conservative on gun control, for example, if you support free gun law or the absence of gun restrictions, they'll disagree with you, but they're not going to get wildly offended like they will if you say trans women aren't real women. Then they're going to lose their minds, because the culture is really what they care about. And the culture is really what we should care about too. So yeah, a libertarian mindset is a losing mindset, because think about it. If you have 2 people coming at you from 2 different sides, and one says, I would like you to do this, but I'm not going to really care one way or the other, and another person says, do this or you're canceled, you're going to side with the person who's going to be more pushy. And that's why all corporations side with the left, because they know the left is much more likely to boycott them than the right. So that's why a libertarian mindset isn't going to go anywhere. There's the old expression, the squeakiest wheel gets the grease. So a libertarian mindset is a really bad strategy, but a lot of conservatives see conservatism as basically synonymous with libertarianism. And they support the legalization of like marijuana, prostitution. There's this conservative meme that circled around a few years ago. It said something like, I want gay married couples to be able to defend their marijuana plants with guns. Okay, so if that's your idea of conservatism, that's not conservatism at all. That's just libertarianism. Libertarianism is not conservatism. And later in this video, I'm going to explain why conservatism itself has some issues. Don't worry. Don't click off this video. I'm not saying I'm like a blue-haired liberal now. I'm not liberal at all, I don't think. But the word conservative is in itself a sort of losing strategy, but I'm going to explain that later. So a libertarian mindset is not going to win. The second really bad strategy that conservatives have is running away. Conservatives, especially in America, are experts at running away. I think they're even better than the French, because conservatives always flee from the centers of culture. They flee from the universities, they flee from the cities, and they flee from the mainline churches. And the church is the most important thing, because the church is the bedrock of culture. All culture really springs from religion. So, because conservatives flee from the mainline churches, they flee from everything else. The best example of this in recent history has been the United Methodist Church. So, a few years ago, the United Methodist Church voted on gay marriage. It was a big controversial vote, and the conservatives actually won the vote. They voted against gay marriage. So you would think the conservatives would then stay in the United Methodist Church given they won the vote, right? Nope. You see, even though they won the vote, they still found it a bit hard to enforce the ban of same-sex marriage in the United Methodist Church, so they just left. They won the dang vote, and they left the dang church, because they just could not stand to be in the same space as liberals. They left the United Methodist Church and completely handed the entire thing over to the liberals. And I know it's a lot more complicated than this, but it's silly to deny that conservatism has a running away problem. Because in every church denomination split, it has always split into the original one and the conservative one. And that's why the more established and historic a church looks, the more established and historic a church is, the more liberal it probably is. That's why if you go to the old historic church building if it's a Protestant church, that is, the old historic church building at the center of your town, chances are it's a liberal mainline church. Now, not all mainline churches are liberal. I'm in a mainline church that has fought off liberalism within our own denomination pretty well, I would say. But we have almost fallen to progressivism several times because conservatives within our church have a retreatist running away mindset. And for the past 100 years or so, conservative Christians in the United States really have had a retreatist mindset. The fundamentalist movement, which was sort of a reaction to the problems of modernity in the United States among conservative Christians, really was all about retreating from everything, about retreating from culture. That means retreating from the cities, retreating from the universities, retreating from the mainline churches, and just hiding away in the rural areas until Jesus comes back. That's another thing. Cities are the bastions of culture. If you own the cities, you own the culture. Sometimes I'll say the culture is bad, and some guy will say, you should come to rural Arkansas. Everyone still loves Jesus here. Okay, first of all, that is going to change in 20 years. But the reason it's going to change is because culture always diffuses from cities outward to the countryside. You don't win by owning the countryside. A lot of people are like, oh, it's not so bad. There's a lot of rural areas in America that are still conservative. Bro, that's called losing the war. Any battle strategist will know that you need to conquer the cities. The cities are where the stuff happens culturally. And it's the same way for the culture war. You need to own the cities. But in America, the left owns literally every major city. Tim Keller talked about this a lot. God bless his soul. Tim Keller always talked about how Christians have really neglected the urban areas and been content with rural areas, but that's why Christianity is losing now. Back when Christianity took over society, back in the Roman Empire, they started by evangelizing to the cities, and then Christianity spread from the cities outward to the countryside. In fact, the word pagan even means rural, because it used to be that the Christians were in the cities and the non-Christians were in the rural areas back in the Roman Empire. But today it's the opposite. Back then was when Christians were winning, and now Christians are losing culturally. Every single year, the religiosity rates of everyone, especially my generation, Gen Z, goes down. There's some, TikTok preachers who show an auditorium filled with people with hands in the air, and they'll be like, oh, Gen Z is so on fire for Jesus. Okay, I'm glad you can find some people who are passionate, but the statistics indicate otherwise. Just because you found a counterexample doesn't mean nothing. Okay? The point is, Christians are losing the culture war. They will continue losing the culture war if they keep running away from things. You see a lot of people saying, oh, don't send your kids to college. Okay, well, the cultural institutions are connected to the universities. If you don't have Christians in the universities, the culture is going to keep getting more anti-Christian. Like, it's like a vicious cycle. Christians see that the culture is corrupt, so they retreat from the culture. So the culture gets more corrupt, so they keep retreating from the culture. It just goes on and on and on. So yeah, running away is the second really bad strategy that Christians have employed. Conservative Christians, that is. The third really bad strategy is being too nice. Now, I'm not saying we should be mean either. The Bible says to do everything with gentleness and respect when we're trying to share our faith and help other people become Christian. But that doesn't mean being nice all the time. Because there are some times where we have to speak the truth, even when the truth gets people upset, gets people unhappy. This is the moral dilemma a lot of Christians have, like, should I use someone's pronouns? Because I don't want to make them unhappy. I don't want them to hate me. I don't want them to feel like they're being attacked. So, yes, it can be a very uncomfortable situation, and we should try to be as loving and gentle as possible. But in doing so, we should never compromise the truth. Goodness, truth, and beauty are all connected. The truth is always good. It is never the wrong thing to do to tell the truth. Now, there are some contexts where, out of politeness, you can avoid saying things that don't need to be said. I think it was Socrates who said, if you're going to say something, especially if it's about someone, you have to ask, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? So if like someone says, oh, do you like my haircut, and they got a really bad haircut, you don't need to say, no, it sucks. But if someone asks you to lie and say something is real that's not real, like saying someone who isn't a woman is a woman, you can't do that. That is not moral. That will always be the wrong thing to do. So lying is bad. And Christians are called not to lie. Now, I know there are some cases where it's hard. Yes, I know. And Christians will be forgiven when we slip up. But a lot of times, collectively, evil goes unstopped because people are too nice to speak out against it. And a lot of the stuff we are facing in the culture war isn't just, like, young people being stupid, like a lot of boomer conservatives think it is. It is really evil. So being too nice is often a losing strategy. Conservatives are always like, I just want people to respect my opinion. I don't care what you say as long as you let me say what I want to say. That's not the leftist strategy. The leftist strategy is, you better say this or we're going to cancel you. We should not become like leftists. But there is a sense in which we need to cancel certain things. I'm not saying we need to be, like, completely cancel culture, but there are certain things that cannot be tolerated. That cannot be tolerated in any sort of respectful debate. A debate takes two, really. It takes two people who are willing to have a fruitful discussion. The vast majority of leftists are not willing to have a fruitful discussion. They're not interested in debating you. That's what I want people to realize. Leftists don't care what you have to say. They're not interested in debate. They're interested in power. They just want to seek cultural and institutional power so they can use that as a club against you. And once they do that, they don't have to debate you at all. Something interesting I noticed is my high school was in a very leftist region. It was New York Public High School, not New York City, but the suburbs of New York City. And leftists were the vast, vast majority. So they would cancel you anytime you spoke out against them, even slightly. And then I went to college in Texas, where Gen Z is still pretty liberal, but not quite as much. Definitely not as much. The leftists at my college did not have enough of a majority to silence those who disagreed. And there, the leftists were a lot more nice and open-minded. But that was only because they had to be, because they did not yet have the power to cancel anyone they disagreed with. So I didn't buy their open-mindedness, because the second they do get the power, they're going to use it and silence anyone who disagrees with it. And that's what they always do. I know there's exceptions, and I'm glad when there is exceptions, but it's the spirit of the movement. Just like I would say, generally, Christians have been been running away from things. Of course, there are many examples of Christians being bold and staying and fighting, but that has not been the general trend, especially not in modern America. Now I'm going to share the secret to leftist victory, and it is really counterintuitive. But the secret to leftist victory is that leftism is Christian in its origins. A lot of these leftist ideas, like making the world a better place, improving society, working towards a good society, those are Christian ideas. And a lot of conservatives end up rejecting Christian ideas because they associate those ideas with leftism. Like helping the poor, for example. A lot of conservatives these days will be like, oh, you want to help the poor? That's socialism. They should put. Well, no. That has always been a Christian idea, but it was hijacked by the left. Just the way the left hijacks Christian institutions, the left also hijacks and twists and distorts Christian ideas. Even the very notion of progress is a Christian idea, and that's why the word conservative might not be the best word to describe what conservative Christians are trying to do culturally, because conservative never wins. In a culture, conservatives are like the brake pedal, and progressives are like the gas pedal. So what that means is that conservatives can slow progress, but they can never actually stop it. The world is always changing and progressing. The question is, are we progressing towards God, or are we progressing away from God? Right now we're progressing away from God, but it doesn't have to be that way. At its essence, Christianity really is lowercase p progressive. It just is progressing towards a much different vision of the future than the left is. So that's why I think, in some sense, Christians could reclaim progressivism. I know I probably shouldn't use that word because I don't want to have to explain it. Like, I'm just getting you guys to think. Christians should reclaim a lot of the ideas that leftists stole from us. That is the way that we can go forward in the future. A lot of conservatives complain about how things are, but they don't offer a vision for the future. So instead of just hating on the way things are and trying to go back to the past, we need to provide a vision for the future, a coherent vision, and explain how to do it. That's what the left does. That's what the left has always done. It's always been about achieving a future utopia, but the problem is the definition of utopia is built by humans. Christians want to progress towards the kingdom of God. That, of course, it won't be fully consummated until Jesus returns. And by the way, when I say these things, a lot of people think I sound like a post-millennialist. I'm actually not. I'm actually amillennial. The difference between me and a post-millennial is I'm not necessarily optimistic about how the future is going to go. I don't know how the future is going to go. I know Jesus is going to come back. But until then, we have no idea what's going to happen. And it really depends on what we do. I know, of course, God has planned out the whole thing. But as far as we're concerned, since we don't know the future, what we do here matters. And that means regardless of what your specific end times view is, what you do here on this earth matters. So that's why I don't think conservatives should advocate for going back to some imaginary golden age. The world was never perfect. It's never going to be perfect until Jesus comes back. We can't rewind the clock. No coherent ideology has ever been built on just trying to go back to something. We are where we are, and the only place to go is forward. So the strategy, I think, that people who would consider themselves conservative Christians, even though we've gone over the problem with that label, strategy we should adopt is, one, we need to retake all the institutions that the left has taken from us. A lot of people think we can't do that, but if they took them from us, why can't we take them back? Are you saying we're weaker than them? The second strategy is we need to be far more bold and assertive. Yes, we will have a lot of uncomfortable debates, uncomfortable conversations, but we cannot be scared and we cannot be timid. We need to be just as bold as they are without being sinful. Psalm 4 says, "Be angry, but refrain from evil." It is right to be angry about how things are in the culture, but we cannot let that drive us to do evil. Because even people with the right motivations can be driven to evil. And the third strategy is present a coherent vision of the future. Christianity needs to be lowercase p, progressive, because it always has been, and that's how it's triumphed historically. We don't just complain about how the way things are. We not just explain solutions, but show people in reality how Christianity can improve society. I think we start by making Christian subcultures. That's kind of what I'm trying to do on this Christian Minecraft server. Those are just some ideas for you guys to consider. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you later. Bye.